Greetings from Xander's Lounge on the plain of New Capenna, where you have to wonder, can you make a cephalid sleep with the fishes? My name is John from the MTG Thoughtcast, and this is Pack It In, where we're going to open up a booster pack and get as many cards as we can into your commander decks. Today we have ourselves a draft booster of Streets of New Capenna. Grab your lucky crowbar and let's hit the streets. Streets of New Capenna. This set was really cool. It took a inspiration from, I guess what would be like 20s noir, mafia, crime lord sort of aesthetics, blending it together with a booster experience that offered a new a new interpretation of how you could do the shards. That was basically the big focus point of this one. The shards were an established thing from the Alara blocks, and they're prominent in this set as well, but sort of with a twist on the identity kind of what those things could kind of do. So like as an example, the Esper color in this block, instead of caring about artifacts, they care about drawing lots of cards all the time off of their connive keyword ability. And we're going to see that in a variety of the cards of this set as we dive into it. First up, we have Psionic Snoop. 2 and a blue for a 0/3 human rogue with flash. When it enters the battlefield, it connives. I actually didn't even see that card before I was talking about the connive thing, but yeah, connive. Oh, now I'm gonna have to see if I remember these family words. Obscura? I want to say is this Obscura is the red, no, not red. Blue, white, and black color faction, and their keyword was connive. Conniving gave you the ability to draw a card and then discard a card. If you discard a non-land, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Reads kind of like Explore a little bit, where if you're discarding or sending a specific card type into the graveyard, the creature gets a little bit bigger. This thing only being a 0/3, even though it has flash, it's a pretty efficient, surprise blocker. It could be a surprise, 1/4 if you discard the right thing. Worst case scenario, it is just a target for blinking that you could draw and discard. It's totally fine. It's not incredible, but it's neat all the same. Hold for Ransom, 1 and a white for an aura. It enchants a creature. Enchanted creature can't attack or block and has 7, is that 7? 7 mana. Hold for Ransom's controller sacrifices it and draws a card. Activate only as sorcery. It does what it says on the tin. You arrest anything on the board that is causing you a problem, and for them to be able to receive their creature back, they have to pay you, the controller of the aura, the ransom. They have to activate the ability, but you, the controller of the aura, get the benefit out of it. Yeah, it's kind of neat. If you are playing a deck that can utilize putting a lot of arrest-style pacifisms on a creature, there's one that comes to mind is Light Paws from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. He allowed you to tutor out auras as you cast auras with the same or lesser mana value. So there's a really neat build with Light Paws that utilizes casting pacifisms and then drawing out other pacifisms. And I guess in that regard, this is a fantastic one, because then if it ends up being taken away from you, you at least get a card out of it if they choose to pay the ransom cost. Goldhound is a single red mana for a artifact creature treasure dog, as all dogs are. It has a 1/1 with first strike, menace, and sacrifice it to add 1 mana of any color. This is really, really cool. This was I think this was the first time treasure was added as a subtype onto anything that wasn't just a treasure token. Treasure was obviously a very huge part of this. The overall across all of the faction colors was that they all were vying for the wealth control of the city, mafia boss and all that kind of stuff. Treasures were very, very prominent amongst this, and this could be found on non-token treasure effects like this one. There's also Glittering Stockpile and Bootlegger's Stash that come to mind that are cards that do this kind of effect as well. On this little dude in and of himself as well, you get this down early and can act as a piece of ramp in a pinch if you needed him to. Also just a dog for our dog lovers out there, so shout out to you, dog people. Most Wanted, 2 and a green for another aura. His enchantment aura, it has Flash, enchants a creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+1, and when the enchanted creature dies, create 2 treasure tokens. Yeah, put a bounty on something, I suppose. It's really neat that this can go battlefield-wide, so if you are looking for something to just boost up something of yours, that you get a ramp benefit out of it. Well, I guess you get the ramp benefit out of it regardless if you put it on one of your creatures or if you put it on your opponent's creature. Incentivizing a reward if the opponent's creature, or yours I suppose, were to be killed or destroyed or something to that degree, so that's kind of neat. I kind of wish it maybe gave you cards as the thing died, but treasure is just as good. Again, you get paid for taking on the bounty. Demon's Due, 3 and a black for an instant. Scry 2, draw 2 cards, you lose 2 life. This is similar to a lot of these kinds of cards. The biggest famous one that comes to mind is Read the Bones. I believe Read the Bones is a sorcery and costs 1 less than this. So at 1 extra mana, you get this at instant speed, but I'm pretty certain this ability has already also been on instant speed as well. So if you like these kinds of effects, then here's just another one that allows you to do that. Black doesn't really get tons of scry, all things considered, so it's super cool that there's something like this that you can utilize to be able to manipulate the top of your deck, especially if you are just black, or black and maybe another color that isn't as strong in being able to see what you have upcoming. Yeah, these are totally fine. If you're looking to do like an instant speed card draw trick, this is probably the better choices are those like Village Rites effects that can turn a creature into card draw, but these are totally fine as is. Expendable Lackey, a single blue mana for a 1/1 human citizen. It has 1 and a blue. Exile it from your graveyard. Make a 1/1 blue fish creature token with this creature can't be blocked. Activate only as a sorcery. So they do these kinds of card effects pretty frequently. Usually they are like creatures that from your graveyard you can make like a spirit or something like that, because it's like symbolizing some kind of like afterlife from the graveyard, or like a spirit or a zombie or something to that degree. It's really interesting that this one turns a human into a fish, so that's super neat. The fact that the fish token can't be blocked, meaning that if you've got the means of getting it protected super well, you could do this really goofy setup of like suiting up this fish with the huge power toughness boosting effects, and it just starts slipping through the radar unblockable. Basically, it's a really silly thing you could do with a token strategy. Otherwise, I mean, yeah, just a 1 mana little guy. He dies super well for a big combat, then turns himself into an unblockable creature. I suppose you could be doing worse. Broker's Initiate, a single white mana for a 0/4 cat citizen, that for 4 mana and a hybrid of green-blue, Broker's Initiate gets base power and toughness 5/5 until end of turn. So the Brokers was the color combination in white, green, and blue. They cared a lot about being sort of the defensive sort of color combination you were looking to, and obviously the joke with them as well is the broken what am I getting at here? The broken brokers, I suppose. It was no secret when it came to doing draft and limited of this set that brokers was far and away the strongest thing you can do. The Riveteers came kind of close just because aggro is aggro. You could sometimes just sneak in really fast wins with this, but brokers, between their +1/+1 counters, their high defenses, and the shield counters that were prominent amongst those colors as well, these were the colors to be playing if you were doing a event within this set itself. As for the initiative itself here, again, it reinforces the idea that I was saying here, like the cards within this faction, they come down either cheap or have really high defense, so they keep you alive, so that you can start setting up your game plan to roll into the late game, whereas this one, for 5 mana, can become a 5/5. That's not awful. It's really neat, all things considered, just something to buffer you till the late game. Echo Inspector, 3 and a blue for a 2/3 bird rogue. It has flying, and when it enters the battlefield, it connives. Yep, same just like that first card we talked about before. Connive is really cool, just the difference on this one here is that this is attached to a flying body. Not much else to say about that, just if you're looking for 1/1 counters on a flyer, there it is. Now these are super cool. Riveteer's Outlook is a land that when it enters the battlefield, you sacrifice it. And when you do, you search your library for a basic swamp, mountain, or forest card, and it enters the battlefield tapped, then you shuffle, and you gain a life. These read like Evolving Wilds, right? So like Evolving Wilds, you have to choose to tap and sacrifice it and get the basic land when you want to. A card like this, as if you are in the colors that allow you to tutor out these specific types of the basic lands, if you were doing Evolving Wilds anyways, and you're in these colors, you might as well get the extra life out of it as well. It's like all the benefits of those dual-typed, tapped, gain life lands that we've had since like Khans of Tarkir, you know, like Scoured Barrens and Bloodfell Caves and things of that nature. It's like that, but it tutors you out a basic land of the colors that you need. There is one of these for each of the shard factions of this set, and I like them a lot. These are really, really cool. If you're the type of deck that is looking to maybe have just a little bit of incidental life gain while being able to get lands out of your library, they're super neat. I really like them a lot. Quick Draw Dagger, 3 colorless mana for an artifact equipment. It has Flash. When it enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. That creature gains first strike until end of turn. It gives the equipped creature +1/+1, and it equips for 1, naturally. This is this kind of card acts as a combat trick that can then stick around on the battlefield as a equipment as you need it. The +1/+1 is nothing like incredible to write home about, but the fact that the creature that this auto attaches to gains first strike until end of turn, sometimes that can just be the little bit of the blowout that you need against a evenly matched blocker to catch somebody off guard. I like it a lot. Riveteer's Requisitioner? Yes, Requisitioner. 1 and a red for a 3/1 Viashino Rogue that when it dies, you create a treasure token, and it has Blitz for 2 and a red. Blitz is the keyword ability of said Riveteers. It allowed you to cast this spell for its Blitz costs. Blitz, excuse me, with a Z. It gains haste, and when the creature dies, you draw a card, and you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So Blitz was super cool. It gave you an alternate casting cost on certain creatures that they are faster, essentially, the aggro colors, as we talked about earlier. And then it just, for as long as it's on the battlefield, gains the keywords of if it were to die, you get a card out of it regardless. So if it dies in combat, you still get a card. If you make it to your end step and it dies, you get the card out of it. It stays on the battlefield until your end step, so if you have any trickery going on of being able to recur that creature back to your hand, then you get to sometimes have these really cool instances of blitzing down creatures, sometimes cheaper, most of the time not, but you get these weird, cool, interesting little loops of being able to get these guys down with haste and then returning them back to your hand and all that jazz. And in the case of this Requisitioner here, is a relatively higher power on the scale, so it reads sort of like Ball Lightnings is a good example of these. They're really, really high power, really low toughness, that their goal is to just smash in damage as best as they can. This one, if you decide to blitz it, will give you a card and the treasure when it dies. That happens regardless if it's been blitzed or not, so really, really interesting. These are super cool. Rafine's Silencer, 2 and a black for a 1/1 human assassin. When it enters the battlefield, it connives. We already talked about connive. When it dies, target creature an opponent controls gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is Rafine's Silencer's power. Yeah, Very neat. Obviously, we've talked before, -X to toughness is one of those really cool keywords that you can, or not even necessarily keyword, but like really cool attribute of being able to play removal that can sometimes allow you to bypass creatures that have indestructible. That is super, especially for mono black, who doesn't get tons of exile based removal. So this thing, if you were to play it in a dedicated 1/1 counters kind of deck, that you could build up its power really, really high, and then it dies and it just takes something else out with it, either indestructible or not. That's really, really neat. Very cool card. Swooping Protector. Time to swoop. 3 and a white for a 2/1 bird citizen. Flash, flying, and when it enters the battlefield with a shield counter on it. These are the shield counters I was talking about earlier. They are the keyword ability of the brokers. It says, if it would be dealt damage or destroyed, you remove a shield counter from it instead. Shield counters were kind of conceived as sort of a fixed version of what the old Magic keyword regenerate was like. It's a little too complex to kind of get into the nitty gritty about it specifically, but regenerate essentially protected your creature from dying once, more or less. And shield counters kind of act in a very similar manner. Now, the shield counter does come off of the creature regardless of which of those two conditions are met, but yeah, being able to protect itself from things like a wrath for a turn. It can also survive in a combat for the turn if it blocks up against something. A really prominent one for Commander is a lot of red decks still use Blasphemous Act. The shield counters protect you from a Blasphemous Act as well. They're really, really neat. They've gone on to do shield counters on a variety of other Commander-centric cards since then, because they were just a very well-received and liked sort of new counter token, because it's also a counter on a creature itself, so they can be moved, manipulated, doubled, proliferated. They're really cool. Shield counters are fantastic. I don't know if necessarily this card is super good, but very interesting that it could be something you get down to get going with shield counters if you're doing that kind of like counter manipulation sort of effect. We have hit our rare in the showcase style for this set, Evelyn the Covetous. It is a weird casting cost here, so 2 mana, hybrid blue-black, black, and then hybrid black-red. 2/5 legendary vampire rogue with flash. We've had a lot of flash in this set, I've noticed. This booster pack, what have we opened now? 5 cards that have flash on it? That's welcome to playing New Capenna, where everything comes down fast and you have no way to stop it. Whenever Evelyn or another vampire enters the battlefield under your control, exile the top card of each player's library with a collection counter on it. And once each turn, you may play a card from exile with a collection counter on it if it was exiled by the ability you controlled, and you may spend mana as though it were any color to cast it. This is really, really cool. You get free creature value from exile as you have this legendary plus any other vampires just come down into play under your control. It's like repeatable Atali effect, basically, that then also provides you mana of any color to cast those things, so nothing is off the table to you. You just start play your vampire, token or non-token. So if you want to go like a token sort of route with this as well, you have token, exile, exile, exile. You start making treasures because that's what this set was all about, and then I'll cast that, and I'll cast that, and you can get out of hand really, really quick. This is a really, really cool commander to play with the effects that reward you for either casting cards from exile or casting things that don't belong to you. There are effects that do that kind of thing, and it's really, really cool. I've seen this played around a bit before, and it can sometimes be quite strong. And we got an island and a copy token left. Picking cards to play in our commander decks as we tend to with this kind of show. Obviously, if we have a legendary creature, we're setting that here. Evelyn seems incredibly fun to be a sort of different take on vampires. Like, poor Edgar Markov has pretty much soured the name on how you can play vampires. This is a really fun and interesting different direction that you could take playing the vampires while being able to, like, just have constant flow of creatures off of other people's libraries. Hold for Ransom could be pretty interesting as well, as we talked about. Again, a pacifism that rewards you back if they were to get rid of it. And so the problem is really that, like, a lot of this pack is kind of a little too little. We, surprisingly, for opening this here, we got very few multicolored cards, I'm realizing. So we have all these monocolored things, but really none of them are incredible. We talked about the Riveteer's Outlook as well, or I'm sorry, Overlook. This is really, really cool if you're interested to try something a bit different instead of Evolving Wilds. And I'd say maybe the Demon's Due. Again, like, these kinds of scry and card draw effects are not awesome, but if you just are looking for something else to throw into your 99 that helps you draw some extra cards, you could be doing worse than cards like this. And that's going to do it for this episode of Pack It In. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this series, and we'll see you again next time for the next booster pack on Pack It In.